I've always been captivated by stone masonry. As a child, I could spend hours observing my grandfather as he carefully arranged stones to build enduring structures. His weathered hands moved with such skill that the tough work seemed effortless. By the time I reached my teenage years, I knew I wanted to follow in his path, not just to honor his memory, but because I had fallen in love with the craft. There's a deep sense of fulfillment in transforming raw materials into something that endures. In my early 20s, after serving 4 years in the military, I came back home with a fresh perspective. The discipline and patience I acquired there complemented the art of masonry perfectly. I took over the family business and soon managed projects my grandfather would have taken pride in. Yet, it wasn't just about constructing stone walls, it was also about the bonds I forged along the way. At Jerry's wedding, I couldn't help but smile, truly happy for him after all he'd been through. Seeing his joy was heartening. When I received his invitation, I called him right away. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. He laughed. "Absolutely. If it weren't for you, I'd never have met Anna. You were there for me when others would have turned away at the wedding." His new wife embraced me and whispered, "I've heard your story. I'd love to hear it directly from you." I watched them with a smile. Despite their age, they acted like young lovers. I wished them all the best. While dancing with the bride, I saw her my ex. I froze and Anna noticed, grabbing my arm. "Please, don't ruin my wedding," she pleaded. "What's she doing here?" "Did Jerry know?" I asked, frustrated. "He knows," she replied. "He invited her for you. Now, let's finish this dance." I was angry but kept my cool. Later, Jerry approached me with a grin. "I only invited her to the reception, not the ceremony. You need to talk to her," he said. I argued, but Jerry and Anna insisted, staying by my side. Eventually, Anna snapped, "You're being ridiculous. Just talk to her, get it over with, and stop spoiling our night." She was right. I'd had too much to drink, and suddenly, there she was, tears in her eyes, hand reaching out. "Will you dance with me, please?" she asked. I could have ignored her, but instead, I took her hand. As we danced, I felt her tears soaking into my jacket. "Let me pretend, just for a moment, that you still care for me," she whispered. The truth was, I did. We swayed slowly, lost in old memories. I thought about all the women I'd known, but she was the one who stayed in my thoughts, the one who had never truly been mine. That's why the pain cut so deep. As I held her tighter, I realized I was only hurting myself. I sensed the trouble brewing, but didn't believe it at first. A smaller man, probably around 40, rushed at me while his friends tried to hold him back. I was 31, tall, strong, and in good spirits. It was a Thursday, payday, and I was waiting for my girlfriend. What could possibly go wrong? I didn't recognize the guy and had never seen him before. He stopped right in front of me, and I wondered what he had in mind. As his hands slowly moved up from his knees, forming a fist, the whole scene was so awkward that I thought he'd never thrown a punch before. Then, he swung and hit me square in the eye. I had been so focused on his odd movements that I didn't even think to defend myself. I went down, and he tried to kick me. I'd been out of the military long enough that this guy caught me by surprise, but my reflexes quickly took over. I rolled, grabbed his leg, and pulled him down, trapping him easily. His 2 friends tried to jump in, but they were outmatched, and the bartender helped pull me away. My cousin, who owned the bar, saw the entire thing but just kept polishing glasses. I caught my breath and leaned in close to the guy. "What's your problem, man? You got a death wish, attacking someone half your age and twice your size." He kept struggling. "Let me go, you lowlife. You need to learn to stay away from married women." I stared at him, thinking he must be either high or out of his mind. I shoved him away and stood up. "I'm not doing anything wrong, but if you come at me again, you'll regret it. Understand?" But he didn't get it. He charged at me again, and this time I knocked him out with a single punch. I told his friends to take him out, and the bartender backed me up. They dragged him out, and we all laughed it off until my date showed up. She noticed my black eye and asked what had happened. Some guy thought I was messing with his wife and blindsided me. Sad, really. He was older, short, and didn't know how to fight, but he had guts, as I explained. Her expression grew pale. I tried to lighten the mood. "Relax, I'm fine. But if you want to kiss it better, I won't complain." She kissed me and joked, "He must have been crazy to pick a fight with you. Didn't he notice these muscles?" Later, she kept pressing me for details about him. "Describe him again," she insisted. "He was older, short, a bit out of shape, but had some nerve. If his wife really is cheating, it could get messy." Melody excused herself, saying she felt unwell. My cousin, the bartender, chimed in, Guys like that are the ones you got to watch out for. They snap when they find out their wives are unfaithful. I've seen it 100 times. Let's hope you scared him off for good. I agreed. I hope he figures out who the real guy is and deals with him, but he needs to get his facts straight first. Melody returned, looking upset. Sorry, the hospital called. There's been a big accident on the highway and they need extra hands. I'll call you tomorrow. If I'm not too exhausted. She kissed me goodbye and left. Being a trauma nurse, this sort of thing happened frequently. Fortunately, she had a few days off after her long shifts while I was out of town for work most of the week. No, I don't have a glamorous job flying around the country solving big problems. I lay stone. That's right, big rocks. My dad traveled constantly for work, earning good money for his company, so my mum mostly raised my sister and me on her own. She did a great job, but when I turned 12, my dad left her for a younger woman. It broke her heart, but my grandfather, who never liked him much, stepped in. Dad tried to rush through the divorce and cut off her medical benefits, but Granddad hired a top-notch divorce lawyer to ensure she got what she deserved. Dad backed off when his career was at risk and eventually moved to the West Coast. After that, we barely saw him, except at my high school graduation. He offered to cover my college expenses if I moved out west, but I turned him down and kicked him out when he kept pressing the issue. That was the last time I saw him. Later, my mum remarried a good man, and at 15, I became a big brother. My stepdad offered to help pay for college, but I chose a different path, enlisting in the military. I served for 4 years, spending a year each in Iraq and Afghanistan. After my service, I used my military benefits to attend college while working for my grandfather. Granddad was a master in stone masonry, and I started learning from him when I was 14, working during summers and after school. While in Afghanistan, I built walls around our camps, and when one of my walls saved lives, the other soldiers began helping out. The local Afghan masons were extremely talented, and I learned a lot from them too. After leaving the military, I joined the family business, and before long, I was managing projects with just a small team while Granddad focused on larger jobs. He had plans to retire, but before that could happen, a distracted driver hit him while he was crossing the street, killing him instantly. By then, he had already transferred ownership of the business to me, so I took over at 27. We specialized in constructing dry stone walls, no mortar, just skill in placing the stones to keep them secure. It's a challenging craft, but we were the best. Before Granddad passed, he secured a contract to restore walls at 5 of the oldest universities in the state, some over 300 years old. I had teams of master masons and journeymen at each location, with pay for the journeymen based on their abilities and the chance to earn more over time. Some doubted whether I could manage the contract after Granddad's death, but I assured them the same skilled masons are still here, and the quality won't drop. They kept the contract with us, knowing how scarce good masons are. I didn't enjoy running the business without getting my hands dirty, so I brought in my sister Becky, who had just finished her business degree. She was great at spotting shoddy work and could even lay stone herself. Together, we managed the company, with some help from our stepdad, Jerry, who was an accountant. My younger brother, Jerry Jr., was 15, and I promised him a summer job learning the trade. Although he had a knack for math and might not stick with masonry, I knew he'd be an asset, no matter what career path he followed. I was 30 when I met Melody one Thursday night. She came to the bar with some friends, and we had an instant connection. My cousin Billy, who owned the bar, often hosted live country bands, and I watched Mel dance to a few upbeat songs, captivated by her movements. When a slow song started, she came over, took my hand, and said, "I don't want to waste a good slow song. Let's dance." I was so taken aback that I just followed her lead while my friends chuckled. Dancing with Mel felt like magic. She moved so close that it felt like we were the only ones there. By the end of the song, I realized I was already smitten. She was about 5', and with heels, she could look me right in the eye. When the music stopped, she kept hold of my hand and led me to her table to meet her friends, though I struggled to remember their names. We chatted until closing time. And one of her friends urged her to kiss me and get my number before leaving. She kissed me, asked if I'd be there the following night, and told me to meet her at 7:30 for dinner before she left, leaving behind her scent and the memory of her kiss. Back at the bar, Billy teased me. Not bad, Bandit. If she'd held up a hoop, you'd have jumped right through it. My nickname came from my real name, Jesse James. My dad named me after the outlaw, because he admired his Robin Hood-like reputation. I had a rough history with relationships, My first serious girlfriend broke things off before I left for the military, saying she didn't want to wait for an uncertain future. We reconnected after I got back, but we had both changed, and the spark was gone. My second relationship was with Cindy, a star on the college volleyball team. She was tall, athletic, and incredibly confident, used to having things her way. She saw herself as special, and the entire campus treated her like royalty since her team had won several national titles. I wasn't bad-looking myself -6 air, muscular from my masonry work, with sandy brown hair, pale blue eyes, and a permanent tan from working outside. One day, Cindy and her entourage walked into a crowded bar where I was eating alone. She expected me to give up my table for her friends, assuming I'd leave. She smiled, confident I'd comply, but I just smiled back and continued eating, surprising her by not giving in. After a minute, she snapped, "Are you going to leave or what?" "We're waiting," I replied calmly. "When I'm finished, or if a smaller table opens up, I'll gladly give up this one. Or, since I have plenty of room, you're welcome to join me." One of her friends chimed in. "You could stand at the bar," I smirked. "Standing while eating might make your legs even stronger. I'm already struggling to find a decent pair of jeans in size 14, don't make it harder." He scowled. "Maybe I'll make you leave," he threatened. He was about 5'8" and looked fit, but his stance suggested he didn't know how to throw a punch. I looked him over, took a sip of my tea, ate a fry, and sighed. 3 possibilities here. 1, you knock me out. And everyone thinks you're a jerk for picking a fight with a guy minding his own business too. I knock you out, and everyone thinks you deserved it for acting like a jerk. Or 3, you let me finish my meal, I leave in a minute, and your friends sit while you grab drinks. I'll be gone by then." He pouted, and Cindy, who had been watching, finally said, "Brian, stop. Just get the drinks. We'll sit here if this gentleman will share the table by then." I was done. I stood, pulled out a chair for the nearest girl, and said, "Please take the table. I'm finished. Have a great evening." I reached for my cane, revealing the cast on my leg from when a student dropped a rock on my foot. Cindy's eyes widened, and she offered, "Stay and let us buy you a beer, thanks, but I can't drink because of my medication," I replied. Brian came back, noticed the cast, and sneered. He followed me outside, thinking I'd be easy prey. "Think that cast will save you. It'll just make it easier for me," he threatened. Without saying a word, I turned and jabbed my cane into his groin. He collapsed immediately, groaning and wetting himself. I calmly warned, "Don't get up until I'm out of sight. If you do, I'll take it as a challenge, and you won't like what happens. Grow up." As I walked out, Cindy and her friends, noticing Brian's absence, followed outside just in time to see the end of our altercation. They helped him up and dusted him off. Cindy began asking around the restaurant about me, and eventually she tracked me down. One evening, when I walked into the bar and grill, she pointed to an empty seat. "I saved you a spot," she said. I was about to sit somewhere else when she gently touched my shoulder. "Please, just for a minute. We owe you an apology. Brian was being a jerk and he's not with us anymore." I sensed she was genuine, so I sat down. I was surprised to find out her friends weren't shallow. One was studying political science with a job offer from a lobbying firm, another was headed to Yale, and a third was pursuing an MBA at Wharton. Cindy was studying sports psychology, planning to use it after her volleyball career. They discussed their plans and occasionally asked for my thoughts, and I joined in when I could. When the topic shifted to my work, one of them asked, "Wow, that's a unique field. Does it pay well? What's your business strategy?" I raised my hand, smiling. "It pays well. I won't become a millionaire, but I'll live comfortably. Most of my work comes through word of mouth, and my services aren't for everyone. I usually handle multi-million-dollar properties. Right now, I have 2 major projects with developers and a restoration contract with the state college system. I've been doing this for 2 years, and tomorrow I'm flying out to pitch similar contracts in other states. I'll likely hire local masons to manage the new workload, even during tough economic times. I stayed busy because the wealthy always want quality work." Everyone seemed impressed, and Becca, a business major, spoke up first. "I'm writing a paper on niche businesses, and I'm thinking about focusing on your company, if that's okay with you." "Sure," I replied, grinning. "It'll be good publicity, but you might need to travel for a deeper dive since most of my work happens out in the field." She smiled back. "No problem, my parents cover any school-related expenses." Cindy didn't look happy about it, but kept quiet. Later, I found out she had tried to convince Becca to drop the idea. Becca refused, saying, "This report will boost my Wharton application." And don't worry, I'm not dating him. What he has in mind is a different story. Cindy and I ended up in a 2-year relationship, and I quickly realized that keeping her balanced meant keeping her on her toes. She had a my way or the highway mentality, and I made it clear, you might be a queen on campus, but that's not how it works with me. I want a relationship where we both lead and follow. She smiled and replied, I'll be your queen and you'll be my king. For a year and a half, I kept her guessing, even delaying intimacy to keep the upper hand. One night, she lost her patience and snapped, Damn it! Bandit, man up and take me. What's the matter? Afraid you won't measure up? I replied calmly, I've heard plenty about your skills from others, but thanks for the offer. I'll pass. Good night. She tried to apologize and physically stop me from leaving, but I pulled away and walked out. I didn't see her for 2 weeks, despite her repeated calls and messages. When I finally returned, her last emails were full of anger. She didn't handle rejection well. One evening, I ran into Becca and her law school friend, Carol, at a bar. Carol grinned and asked, Did Cindy dump you? Becca laughed. Look at his face, I bet you dumped her. Didn't you, Jess? I shrugged. It was mutual. We had different expectations for a relationship. Carol laughed. I'm guessing she wanted you to jump through hoops, and you refused. She's been a wreck since you left. Just then, Cindy walked in with a basketball player. She spotted us and stormed over, leaving the guy trailing behind, trying to hold her hand. She snapped at him. Let go of me, we're just friends. The guy, clearly annoyed, said, Why are you stuck on that redneck? He dumped you, and he's a nobody. He'll never be able to support you like I can. Becca nearly fell out of her chair, laughing. What a fool, you're not even in the pros yet, and that's no guarantee. Jesse runs a successful business, earns 6 figures, and that number's only going up. Not bad for a redneck, huh, Dustin? Just as Dustin was about to argue, Carol cut him off. Dustin, whatever you're thinking, stop. Look at him, those muscles aren't from a gym. He's seen combat twice and could take you down in a heartbeat. Why don't you go sit at the bar? Becca and I will keep you company. They led him away as he protested, while Cindy sat down across from me. She stared at me for a while before finally saying, The worst thing about being spoiled is that it usually works. I know I'm arrogant and controlling, but I'm not a bad person. Why don't we try again? I stayed silent, making her uneasy, so she continued, I regret that night. I thought I was a prize to be admired, but I realize I'm just a person and there are better ones out there. But none of them will love you like I do. I'll wait, and you can set the pace. 4 months later, Cindy wanted to discuss where our relationship was headed after she lost the national championship. She blamed me for distracting her, but received an offer to play professional beach volleyball, mostly supported by endorsement deals. We talked it over and decided to get married, agreeing to wait until after her first year. She traveled with me for a month before her season began, and we cherished the time together. When she left, it was tough, she cried, and I practically had to push her onto the plane. If you don't like it, come back home. I can pay for your education, I told her. She hugged me tightly and replied, I need to prove I can take care of myself. I signed a contract and I have to play. Her first season went well. She and her partner ranked first. The skimpy outfits they wore on TV bothered me, but she just laughed it off, saying, It's in the contract, honey. It's part of an ad campaign. You don't mind, do you? I supported her, though we only saw each other about once a month for a few days at a time. When she finally came back home, my mum started dropping hints about wanting grandchildren. Meanwhile, my sister Becky was settling down with her wife. After my mum came to accept Becky's life choices, she began encouraging them to consider adoption or artificial insemination, which they were open to. After Cindy spent 4 weeks at home, she began acting distant. When I confronted her, she eventually admitted I signed another contract for next season. They doubled my pay, and I couldn't turn it down. I was furious, and we fought constantly. You promised last year would be the last, I reminded her. Cindy yelled back in frustration, but then her tone softened, and she spoke quietly. I'll write a contract saying that if I don't quit next year, our marriage is over. Please, Bandit, this means the world to me. I looked at her and said, There's no need for a contract. If you don't quit next year, I'm gone. Understood. She went pale and made promises one she didn't keep. Early the following year, her team's winning streak continued, and her partner Jen even called me to express her gratitude for letting Cindy stay on the tour. Jen mentioned that this would be her last year before moving on to teaching and coaching. She joked, If my marriage had been like yours, I might still be married. Her comment left me with an uneasy feeling. Later, when Cindy told me about Jen's call, I gave her a questioning look, and she fell silent. What arrangement is Jen referring to? I asked. Cindy tried to brush it off with a laugh, saying that Jen was just confused after her divorce and reassured me I'll never make that mistake. When I pressed further, she admitted that Jen had cheated with another guy on the tour, which had caused her marriage to end. Cindy promised I would never hurt you like that. Normally, Cindy called me every Monday and Tuesday, but one week she went silent despite my calls and emails. The following week, she came home unexpectedly, furious that I hadn't been returning her calls. I explained that I was just following her example, which led to a massive argument. In a moment of anger, I mentioned her Spanish boyfriend, and she turned pale as I walked away. 2 days later, Cindy appeared at my workplace, begging for a conversation. She insisted that nothing inappropriate was happening and promised to leave the tour after the season. She said everything I wanted to hear, and I believed her. She completed 2 more photo shoots, but one afternoon, while waiting for my truck tires, I picked up a golf magazine. Inside, I found a photo of Juan Pablo kissing Cindy at a beach volleyball match. The article mentioned that he attended her games to support his girlfriend. Rage surged through me. I ignored her calls and flew out to her next match. When I arrived at her hotel, it was Juan who opened the door. He went pale upon seeing me, and Cindy wasn't there. I called her, and she cheerfully told me she was out to dinner with her partner Jan. I chatted casually for a few minutes while Juan stood frozen in place. After ending the call, I turned to Juan and told him I was in the military, spent 2 years in the desert taking out targets. I won't end you, but if you lie, I'll break your wrists and knees. You'll survive, but you won't walk or use your hands properly. It's up to you. Would I have followed through? No, but I was so enraged that Juan believed me. He started confessing. It began at the end of the first season. Juan admitted, adding, "Not with me, but with another player. Cindy said you were okay with it, that you had an agreement. She told me it would end after the season and that she was eager to marry you." "Where is she now?" I demanded. Panicked, Juan revealed they were staying at another hotel. I grabbed him by the collar and warned him not to alert her. Later, I watched as Cindy and her new partner entered their hotel. I waited a few minutes before breaking down the door. Cindy nearly fainted when she saw me. Her partner tried to act tough, but I quickly pinned him. "How long?" I barked. 3 or 4 months, he stuttered. "You knew she was engaged and still went along with it?" I asked, noting that he, too, was engaged. He begged me for mercy. Cindy quietly adjusted her dress, and I realized that time was running out as a crowd gathered in the hallway. I released him, threw a punch, and said, "Good luck playing golf." Now turning to Cindy, I said, "Keep the ring, we're done." I left, called the hotel manager, and offered to cover any damages and medical costs, then got out of there. The next day, the tournament announcers brushed off his injury as an accident, but rumors spread quickly, and he flew home as a newly single man. Cindy and her partner struggled through the rest of the season. Jen retired, while Cindy continued playing for 4 more seasons before earning her PhD. She tried reaching out to me for months, even telling my mother that she would come to see me. My mum laughed and told her off, and Cindy never made the trip. For 2 years, I struggled to trust women. Then, I met Melody, and everything changed. She worked as a trauma nurse, and our schedules matched well. We took things slowly: dinners, dancing, visiting museums, and attending baseball games. But it wasn't long before I fell deeply in love with her. We avoided seeing each other on her work days, but she always called me during her breaks. She lived with 2 other nurses, and they had a strict no-boyfriend policy to prevent drama. One roommate had even stolen another's boyfriend while she slept, so the rules were necessary. Tired of meeting up in motel rooms, I started looking for a house and asked my business contacts for tips. They teased, saying, "She's got you hooked." One designer advised, "Let her have a say in choosing the house." I took his advice and included Melody in the process, using my inside knowledge to explore listings. The first few houses didn't catch her interest, but then we found a 4-bedroom home on 3 acres just outside of town that she adored. She smiled and said, "I'm thinking about tree houses." I took a week off, closed the deal, and secured a great price. That Friday, we returned to the house, and I asked her, "Could you see yourself being happy here?" "I'd love it." "But why?" She replied, "Because we bought it." "I need you to pick out the furniture. How's that sound?" Before she could answer, I got down on one knee and proposed, telling her I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She fainted from shock, and when she came to, she said, "I love you, Jesse, but I can't marry you yet. Give me 6 months, and then ask me again." I hadn't expected that, and though I felt let down, she comforted me. The next day, we went shopping for furniture, and her remark about a rocking chair, this might come in handy in a year or two, gave me hope. Later, I introduced her to my family. My mum and Becky liked her, my little brother was smitten, and my stepdad's smirk showed approval. Only my grandma seemed less than enthusiastic. The following Friday, I arrived at the new house to find that she had already set up a dining room and guest room. She was waiting for me in our new bed, playfully teasing, "I was going to start without you. I want to christen every piece of furniture that weekend. We barely left the bedroom." The next weekend, while waiting for her at a bar, I got into a fight after she left. I stayed for a few more drinks, and on my way home, 2 gunshots hit my car. My instincts kicked in, and I ducked behind my SUV. The same drunk guy from earlier was coming after me, yelling, "I'll make sure you never mess up another husband's life." I quickly realized he wasn't finished with me, and my stepdad's advice echoed in my mind, "Never leave a live snake behind." I waited silently, and when he got close, I tossed my shoe to distract him. As he turned, I grabbed his arm, yanking him backward and causing the weapon to drop. I hit him a few times before realizing I needed to stop before it went too far. I hauled him into my truck and drove to an old barn. When he began to stir, I dragged him out, letting his head hit the gravel. After splashing water on his face, he slowly realized what was happening. "I didn't plan to ruin your life," I said, kicking his gun away, "but I wanted to scare you." A .32. "Really?" He nodded weakly. "What do you want me to say?" "I'm not okay with you seeing my wife. Sooner or later, I'll find a way to get even. You might as well finish me off now." Despite his situation, he wasn't backing down. I slapped him lightly and asked, "I'm not involved with anyone's wife. What do I need to do to end this?" Defeated, he suggested I check his wallet. I found a photo of Melody in a wedding dress, looking younger. "Is that her?" he asked. "You didn't know, did you? How does it feel?" I couldn't find words. We ended up sharing a bottle of whiskey I'd brought for the new house, talking through the night. The next morning, I woke to find him holding the .32. "You're right, it's not much, but I wouldn't want to be shot by it," he said, putting it away. We spoke more during the drive back, and he admitted that he'd always suspected this might happen, given their age gap and time apart. He worked weekends as a truck driver, which left her plenty of time alone. I asked him what his next steps were, and he replied, "I'm going to divorce her, of course. She's yours now if you still want her," with a bitter chuckle. I admitted that I wasn't sure if I could trust her again. As we drove back to his car, I reminded him to take his gun. "Keep it," he said. "I don't need it," as a reminder of what almost happened as he drove away. I asked him one last time, "What's your plan?" He replied, "You're lucky you can just walk away. I'm going through with the divorce. If it turns ugly, let me know, and I'll testify for you." I watched him drive off, feeling a mix of relief and confusion. Later, I emailed Melody, writing, "I'm not running away, but I need time. Don't reach out until next weekend. I'll think things through, but don't expect me to believe much." She responded quickly, saying, "Thank you for letting me speak. There's a lot you don't know, and I want to explain. I'll be at your house next Saturday at 4. Believe it or not, I love you." The week crawled by as I wrestled with what I wanted to say. My co-workers noticed my mood but gave me space. As Saturday approached, my anxiety grew. When she arrived, I made her sit at the kitchen table she had spent weeks picking out. As she began talking, I interrupted. "Ground rules," I said firmly. "No I love yous or apologies. Just tell me why you went to bars and dated while married. Would you have been okay with me doing the same?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and after a few moments she started to speak. She explained that she grew up poor, raised by her alcoholic father after her mother left. She married Jerry for security, not for love, and when their schedules clashed, she began going out with friends to ease her loneliness. She always wore her wedding rings, but then she met me. "I didn't love Jerry like I love you," she confessed, "but I respected him. I didn't know how to break it to him." "You should have left him when you realized your feelings," I replied, frustration in my voice. "Instead, you kept him as a fallback," she whispered. "I know," I shook my head. "Even if we stayed together, how could I ever trust you again? What happens when I'm away for work and you're lonely?" She cried, but I continued, "It's about trust, Mel. I need to trust my partner completely, and right now, I don't think I can trust you." She sat in silence for a moment, then said, "I understand. But no one will ever love you as much as I do. Even if we never get back together, I'll prove that to you." Without another word, she left. We only spoke twice after that, with little progress. Eventually, she started sending me emails, month after month, always ending with a plea for another chance. As time went on, they became less frequent. She mentioned going to therapy and even attending sessions with Jerry a few times. After 7 months, the emails stopped. Her last message read, "My dear Jess, this will be my final note. I'm officially divorced now, the second best day of my life. The best was meeting you. Therapy helped me see that I was too immature and selfish to marry Jerry. I stayed out of fear, but it was doomed from the beginning. Now I'm living with 2 other nurses, and for the first time, I feel truly independent. To mark my divorce, I'm giving you a gift. I'm letting you go. I realize now that if I were in your place, I wouldn't trust me either. I hope you find someone who loves you as much as I did and still do. Mel." I stared at her message, my finger hovering over the delete key, but I couldn't bring myself to erase it. It hurt too much to read again, so I saved it instead. That's how I drifted through life. If it hadn't been for my job, I might have lost everything. It took almost 10 months before I went on another date. She was the sister of a contractor I often worked with, smart, beautiful, and loved to dance close. We had a good time, but there wasn't any spark. After a couple more dates, she met someone else, and we parted on friendly terms. During this time, I ran into Mel twice. The first was at a stoplight, where I saw her through the window of a bistro, laughing with friends. I sat there so long that the car behind me honked. She turned and spotted me as I drove away. The second encounter happened at a club while I was on a date with Tina. When our eyes met, Mel burst into tears and ran outside. Her friend Gwen came over to my table, angrily accusing me of flaunting my new relationship in front of Mel. I remained calm and said, "It's been nearly a year. We were bound to cross paths eventually. Tell her I'm sorry if I upset her, but she needs to move on." As she walked away, Gwen muttered, "A hole." Tina, noticing the tension, asked for the whole story. After I explained, she said, "You're not over her. I could see it in your face when you noticed her Jerry, who had started hanging out at my cousin's bar, and I eventually became friends." He admitted that he still thought about Mel sometimes. He mentioned that a nurse friend of hers told him they called her the nun because she hadn't dated since me, saying it was because I'd spoiled her. Jerry also mentioned that Mel had been writing apology letters as part of her therapy. I confessed that I had received one of those letters, but didn't go into detail. Jerry had moved on and was dating a military widow. They made a great pair, and I even helped sponsor his stepdaughter's softball team. We planned his bachelor party together. Seeing Jerry's happiness made me reflect on my own future, wondering if I'd ever be the one cheering my kids on from the stands. I immersed myself in work, taking on more contracts than we could manage. Eventually, my family persuaded me to slow down, reminding me that quality mattered. I passed some jobs to other contractors and got things back under control. One day I ran into Becca, an old college friend, who offered me a contract to build a small stone cottage. I agreed, and while working, I discovered a hidden stash inside a chimney: old whiskey, letters, and a wedding ring. I returned the items to the family, and they later donated them to a historical society. The story made the news, leading to a flurry of chimney searches. Becca later invited me to a party to show off my work. During the event, she mentioned that she still kept in touch with Cindy, my ex, and showed me photos. Cindy had cut her hair short and put on some weight, but she looked happy with her second husband, David. Becca shared that Cindy had come clean about her past and was working hard to make this marriage succeed. Surprisingly, I felt genuinely glad for her. I hadn't thought about her in years, but it seemed she had finally found peace. Meanwhile, I stopped dating, trying to figure myself out. Melody's memory continued to linger in my thoughts. On a whim, I sent her an email. "Mel, it wasn't intentional when I saw you at the club. It was purely by chance, and I never meant to hurt you. If it's any comfort, it ruined my night too." "Jess," she replied the next day, "I'm sorry if I ruined your evening. I know it's truly over between us, and I accept that we'll never be together again, but I can't stop loving you. And I've stopped trying. Time hasn't healed me, it's only made me miss you more. I got a job offer at a different hospital, far enough that we won't bump into each other. I think I'll accept it and try to start over. Maybe then I'll finally be able to move on. I wish you all the best. Jess." Mel. P.S. If you ever want to talk, just text. I thought it over. We didn't see each other often, but if moving away would help her, I didn't mind. Maybe at least one of us could find some happiness. And now, here we were, dancing together. The sensation was both familiar and new. Jerry had bribed the orchestra to play 3 slow songs back to back. I would have stopped after the first, but she kept holding on. When the music finally ended, she clung to my arm. "Will you sit with me for a while, please?" "I'll beg if I have to," she pleaded, trying to avoid any embarrassment. I agreed, and she led me to a small, secluded table where we could talk. She tried making small talk for a moment before I stopped her. "Just say what you really mean, Mel," I urged. She looked at me with a determined expression. I want you back. I've tried to move on, but I can't stop loving you. I see it in your eyes you still care about me too. Why not give us a fresh start? Just one chance. If it doesn't work, I'll walk away for good. Please, just one date." She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, and I watched her speak with Jerry and Anna before slipping out the door. Jerry sat down beside me. "Well," he asked. "Well, what I responded. Are you going to give her another chance? You deserve it," he insisted. I stared at him in disbelief, but he sighed and added, "Since she met you, she hasn't been with anyone else. She even wrote in a letter that she caught something at work and needed 6 months to recover. She's been through a lot." I thought about it for 2 weeks before I called Mel and invited her to a concert in a nearby town. After a long pause, she softly said, "Yes, we met at a playground before the show. She wore a light yellow sundress, and her smile brightened when she saw me. We strolled around, did some window shopping, and enjoyed the performance. When the duo played a song about rekindling old love, she couldn't help but smile. After the concert, I suggested getting pizza at Jan's, one of our favorite spots. She agreed, tears in her eyes, as we shared a pizza. I walked her to her car afterward. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, and drove away, leaving me standing there, wondering what it all meant. We went out 2 more times a movie, where she cuddled up to me, and a day at the local fair. She laughed at the exhibits and admired the quilts, reminding me of when she once dreamed of making quilts for our future children. I didn't say anything but slipped a quilting club flyer into my pocket as a possible birthday gift. At the fair, we shared our first kiss while watching fireworks. It was spontaneous, unplanned. We didn't speak afterward, and when I drove her home, she just walked inside without a word. For the next 3 weeks, we didn't see each other. We kept in touch over the phone, but she seemed distant, and I started questioning if the kiss had been a mistake. I called my family to let them know I had wrapped up my project and would be back by Thursday. They sounded relieved but worried I was overworking myself. I sighed, tossing my dirty laundry in the foyer, deciding I'd wash it later. A shower was my first priority. Since moving into the apartment, the only big change I made was upgrading the bathroom to include a large shower with multiple nozzles and settings for a full flow, massage, or mist. Ironically, I designed it with Mel in mind, but it wasn't completed until 2 weeks after we broke up. Living alone, you forget to think about what you're wearing. Then I heard a giggle. Mel was sitting on my bed. "What? How? Why?" I stammered. She grinned. "Your mom told me you'd be home tonight. You never asked for your keys back, remember? I'm here because I need to talk. Now get dressed and meet me in the living room." She teased, "Or you could stay like that, and I'll join you." Flustered, I quickly grabbed some clothes. When I came out, she was sitting in the rocking chair, smiling. "I have something to say, and I need you to hear me out without interrupting," she began. I sat on the couch we had picked out together, memories flooding back. She continued, "I know I've seemed distant lately. It's because I miss what we had, and I want it back. I want you back. I know you still love me, and I still love you, but love isn't the issue, it's trust. I lied to you and hurt you, and I need to earn back your trust. So here's my proposal. Let me move back in. You can set up cameras, put a GPS tracker on my car, even make me wear an ankle bracelet like a criminal. If that's not enough, I'll wear a chastity belt just to prove I'm serious." She lowered her head, embarrassed. I gently explained, "You don't have to do any of that. If we tried, it would ruin our relationship. Trust can't be forced. You'd grow to resent it, and I couldn't live like that." She started crying, and I pulled her close, trying to comfort her. "Is this the end?" she whispered. "No, it's a new beginning. The fact that you'd go to those lengths shows me we can make it work. Let's take our time and rebuild from here." Her hopeful smile reminded me of sunlight breaking through a storm. The next morning, I planned to take her to breakfast and pick up some clothes from her apartment. She had a double shift at work, but would be back for the weekend. I met her roommates, Amanda and Beth. Amanda, a twice-divorced blonde, had a crush on Mel, while Beth had anger issues and was undergoing therapy after her ex-husband left her. As soon as Mel left the room, they turned on me. Amanda accused me of never forgiving Mel and said I'd eventually hurt her. Beth joined in, calling me an unforgiving jerk who'd make Mel suffer before leaving her again. Angry, I shot back, "This has nothing to do with either of you. Amanda, you're just in love with her, and Beth, you don't want anyone to be happy. Your husband deserves a medal for putting up with you." Just then, Mel walked back in, catching the end of our exchange. Amanda turned to her and said, "Mel, this guy isn't going to forgive you, he's just waiting for you to feel safe so he can hurt you again." I was beyond furious. Pride isn't a bad thing, Amanda. It helps you stay true to yourself. Even when everything else falls apart, Mel didn't say anything and I sighed. "Mel's ready, we're leaving." I took her hand and led her out of the apartment, feeling relieved to be away from that toxic environment. On the way to the car, Mel stayed quiet, and instead of bringing her suitcase inside, she put it in the trunk. I was puzzled. "Mel, why not leave your suitcase here? You don't have to carry it around, you can come back for it later." She avoided my gaze. "I'll pass. I'll probably just go home and crash after my shift. I need some time to think." Her words hit me hard. "What's going on?" "Earlier you regretted taking on extra shifts, and now, after listening to those bitter women, you don't want to spend time with me." Frustrated, I added, "Fine, go find someone else. But I've lived without you before, and if you start playing games, I'm done." I want my key back. I could see that she realized her mistake, but after all we'd been through to get to this point, I wasn't in the mood to be patient. Was she really pulling away again? I kept telling myself I didn't need her, but deep down I did. I missed her even more than before and was frustrated with myself for letting my hopes get high again. To keep my mind occupied, I threw myself into work, tackling a pile of projects. I stayed away from home for 3 weeks, only returning for a day to do laundry and check on the place. When I pulled into my driveway, I was stunned to see her car parked there. Mel rushed out of the house and hugged me so tightly that she nearly knocked us both over. She was sobbing and babbling, and I had to gently restrain her hands to keep her from clinging too hard. "Quiet," I snapped, surprising us both with my raised voice. I pulled away, leaving her on the ground, but her sobs turned to wails. Despite wanting to shut her out, I couldn't ignore her anguish. I picked her up and carried her inside, not too gently, and handed her a glass of water. "Drink," I ordered. After she took a few sips, I asked, "How did you get in?" She whispered, "I broke a window." I stared at her in disbelief. "You did what?" She repeated, "I broke the window and used the spare key. I had a fight with Amanda and Beth, and they threw me out. I came here because you weren't answering my calls or messages. I waited, hoping you'd come back. I just needed to be close to you. If you want me to leave, I will." Throwing her out seemed too harsh. "Not now. Order a pizza, I'm starving. I'll be back after I shower." When I came out, dressed in sweats, she had freshened up too, looking younger and more hopeful. We ate the pizza together, and I noticed she looked thinner. "Are you dieting?" I asked. She shook her head. "I just haven't had much of an appetite after dinner." We moved to the living room. I deliberately chose not to sit next to her, which seemed to disappoint her, but I needed to clear my thoughts. "Be honest with me, Mel. We both want to be together, but how can I trust you again? What can you do to prove it?" She had a plan. Couples counseling. A friend at work went through it, and it helped her and her boyfriend work through their issues. "I think it's our only shot. I'm willing to try, even if it means finding out we're not right for each other. This half-life is killing me. Please, think about it." I agreed to consider it, and she nodded. Then she started pulling her suitcase toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, surprised. "To a motel. I'll start looking for an apartment next week. I know you don't want me here," she replied quietly. Instead of letting her leave, I picked up her suitcase and began unpacking it. "Help me put this away," I said, playfully twirling one of her strings. Blushing, she managed a smile through her tears. "Fine, but you have to take them off as often as possible," she teased. "Deal," I replied, "but there will be some conditions. Make an appointment for counseling, and let's take this slow." She agreed, and we shared a bottle of wine, enjoying the moment. "We'll make this work, Mel, but I need to know I can trust you completely. If either of us feels it's not going to work, we have to be honest with each other," I said. She nodded and added, "And I need you to spend more time with me, not just 1 day a week. Promise to attend all our counseling sessions, no excuses," I promised, and that ended our conversation for the night. We didn't make love, it didn't feel right. Instead, I stayed awake, wondering if we were finally on the right path. The next day, we began couples counseling. I was surprised she chose a male therapist, but she explained he had the highest success rate. After individual sessions where we each expressed our hopes, we realized that our goals were more aligned than we thought. When we began joint sessions, the counselor was calm but direct. Mel often broke down in tears, and though I didn't cry, there were moments when his questions pushed me to the brink of anger. During one session, Mel confessed what I had suspected: she had stayed with Jerry as a fallback in case I wasn't who she hoped I'd be. When she realized she wanted to be with me, she started the divorce process but delayed filing because she wasn't sure about my feelings. "That's ridiculous," I said when she finally admitted it. The counselor turned to Mel. "Is that true?" he asked. "During those 6 months, you weren't sure of Jesse's feelings even while spending weekends with him. You still shared a home with Jerry, shared moments of affection, and then did the same with Jesse. You only filed for divorce after you got caught." Mel suddenly shouted, startling both of us. "You think I don't know what I did? I betrayed them both and ruined my chance at happiness." The counselor stayed calm. "I don't think that's completely true, or the two of you wouldn't be here. But I think we've reached the end of what we can accomplish in these sessions." Both of us were taken aback. "But we're not healed yet," Mel protested. "No, but you've reached the point where the rest is up to you. You love each other, that's clear. But the real question is, can Jesse trust you again? You're both uncertain whether the pain and effort will be worth it. I can't make that choice for you. If you can forgive each other, you won't regret it. If you can't, it's time to part ways. I wish you both the best." After that session, Mel and I tried to move forward. For 3 months we had good days, but certain moments triggered tension. The pressure began to build. She called me every night and even sent photos to prove she was at home, but it became exhausting. One evening I told her, "Stop sending pictures. Stop locking yourself in the house. You made a mistake, and if you've learned from it, we'll be fine. If not, then it's over." She seemed to understand and gradually began spending time with friends again. One night, she called to thank me for trusting her. It felt like progress, but I sensed something was still wrong. Lately, she had grown quieter, and I worried that we might be reaching the end. Then, we went to a flea market, one of her favorite activities. Watching her browse with such ease, I saw her smile at me, but it quickly faded, replaced by a look of sadness. I realized then that if I didn't change, I would lose her for good. As we left, a sudden thunderstorm struck. Mel, who had always been afraid of storms, flinched, so I wrapped my arm around her. I went to get the truck, silently hoping for a way to break through the emotional barriers I'd built. A song came on the radio, "Slow Dancing," swaying to the music, and I noticed a bumper sticker that read, "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain." I knew what I had to do. I stepped out into the downpour, held out my hand and said, "If you love me, come dance with me." "This is our last chance." People watched, and Mel, terrified of storms, hesitated but eventually stepped into the rain and took my hand. The song played for another minute, but it was enough. She faced her deepest fear for me. We laughed, cried, and when we got home, we made love. 9 months later, I found myself standing in line for the tallest roller coaster. Mel had once said that she'd ask me to prove my love someday, and now, as I was being strapped into the seat, she let go of my hand and stepped back. "You're not coming with me?" I asked, panicked. Tears filled her eyes as she smiled and replied softly, "I can't." "Why not?" I shouted as the ride began to move. That's when I saw the sign, "Pregnant women are not allowed on this ride."